Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. As you may know, we are in the off season, and it's kind of that difficult time of the year where we have to create content, and we got to keep the ball rolling. We got to focus on the future for the Buffalo Bills, and I absolutely hate this time of the year because number one, we were pretty much focused on the Bills going to the Super Bowl, and that did not happen. Unfortunately, the Kansas City Chiefs knocking us out. Another year of misery for the Buffalo Bills, and it's not where we want to be. But we are going to focus in on the future and talk about some of the biggest decisions that the Bills are going to have to make. So today we're going to break down the Buffalo Bills 2025 free agency class. We'll talk about some of the players that the Bills will need to decide whether they want to build their future with and whether or not they want to re-sign this player or let them walk. We're not going to go directly into the series because this is going to be a series that's going to go on throughout the offseason leading up into free agency. We're just going to kind of highlight some of the players that we're going to talk about. We're going to do this in jersey order, actually, which is going to be fun. So we'll start with the lower players on the list. So we'll start with their lowest jersey number going all the way up to the highest jersey number. And we'll preview the 2025 free agency class for the Buffalo Bills. So in this series, like I mentioned, it's going to go on each and every week leading up into free agency. We'll probably highlight 1 to 2 players per week and talk about them on the list. We'll have some highlights from all 22 on the players. We'll also have their stats along with some of the biggest accomplishments that they had in college along with the NFL. And we'll talk about how they got to the Buffalo Bills on the roster, whether they came via trade, whether they came via free agency, or whether they just were drafted by the Buffalo Bills. And we'll talk about this coming up. So we'll stay tuned and talk about that soon. But before we begin this series, I want to hit our actually, we won't hit our intro. I was going to hit the intro, but unfortunately, the intro was not selected on here. So let's begin and talk about the 2025 free agency class. I'm going to pull it up here. As you can see, you can also see me on the list too. So let's talk about the 2025 free agency class. We'll start it off with Damar Hamlin, Mac Hollins, Amari Cooper, Ty Johnson, Reggie Gilliam, Rasul Douglas, Reed Ferguson, Quentin Jefferson, Tommy Doyle, Dwayne Smoot, Jordan Phillips, and Austin Johnson make up the unrestricted free agents for the Buffalo Bills. Then you have the restricted free agents for the Buffalo Bills. These players include Alec Anderson, Shane Bichelle, along with Quentin Morris. Ryan Vandemark has already re-signed with the Buffalo Bills, so he is no longer on the list. But at the time of making this video and at the time of making the graphic here, he was a restricted free agent for the Buffalo Bills. So let's talk about the list of players on this list. We'll kind of highlight them a little bit, and we'll start off with Damar Hamlin, who was a safety coming out of college, and he was drafted to the Buffalo Bills in 2021 out of Pittsburgh, comes to the Buffalo Bills primarily as a backup with the expectation that he could blossom into the starting role for the Buffalo Bills in the near future. Remember, the Bills at the time had Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer on the roster. They also had a few other players sprinkled into the mix in terms of backups, and Dean Marlowe's along the list, and some other safeties in the room as well. So Damar Hamlin was more of a special teams player. In 2024, becomes the starter after both Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer leave the Buffalo Bills in free agency. He blossomed into a nice career in 2024 and turned it into 89 tackles, 2 interceptions during the year, and he was primarily the starting safety. He played throughout the year with a Guardian helmet. If you remember, the Guardian helmet is the helmet of choice for players that may have issues with concussions or they want to prevent concussions. So you saw him in the playoffs with that Guardian helmet on, and he is a unrestricted free agent in 2025, and it'll be a difficult decision on whether the Bills decide to re-sign or let him walk. The next player on the list, you know him very well. You've seen him throughout the offseason along with the regular season. This is a wide receiver that is a not only the third wide receiver on the roster, but also the gunner for the Buffalo Bills. And Mac Hollins, he comes over from the Atlanta Falcons to Buffalo, kind of has some unique traits to him. He's kind of the goofball type player in terms of what he does. This is a guy that doesn't like to wear shoes no matter where he goes, doesn't believe in elevators, doesn't believe in using any forks or spoons with him. Kind of that unique trait. Signs a 1-year contract with the Buffalo Bills. Blossomed into a starting role with the team, primarily as a blocker for the Bills, but also does some good things in terms of his numbers on the field. Finishes around 400 yards on the season, 5 touchdowns overall, 30 receptions, around 30 receptions for him, and does this all, like I mentioned, as a primarily backup, and does things that on the field that helps the team no matter where it is. So that's going to be a difficult decision for Brandon Beane to decide whether he is going to re-sign or let him walk. Next player on the list is jersey number 18. You remember him being acquired by the Cleveland Browns. This was the big splash that the Bills got in the blockbuster trade for Amari Cooper. The Bills giving up a 3rd-round pick along with a late-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, acquiring Amari Cooper. Now the numbers for a Pro Bowl player, this is a player that had 5 Pro Bowls before coming to Buffalo. The numbers were good. He was finishing with over 1,000 yards per season this year. Numbers didn't really work out, but that's kind of a tendency when you have a player coming over to the Buffalo Bills or coming over to another franchise. It's hard to develop some chemistry, especially later in the season when you're trying to learn the playbook. It's difficult for them to develop chemistry with a quarterback. And he did things on the field that were great. He was a great teammate for the Buffalo Bills. He didn't have the numbers necessarily that you wanted, but he on the field and off the field, a great teammate for the Bills. It will be difficult for them to decide whether they want to re-sign him or let him walk. But the Bills do have some good things to say for him. He finished out the year with just over 20 catches for a little over 250 yards in the regular season, and also had 2 touchdowns, but in the playoffs, finished out with 6 catches for 42 yards in the playoffs. So it'll be a difficult decision for the team to decide whether they want to re-sign or let him walk. But a player that's going to be a hot commodity in free agency will be Amari Cooper for sure. Next player on the list wears jersey number 26. He is a running back for the Buffalo Bills, coming over from the New York Jets, finishing last season as the primary backup for the Buffalo Bills in 2023 when he was acquired from the New York Jets. He spent most of his time on the practice squad of the Buffalo Bills until Damian Harris was injured, actually, with a neck injury. He was carted off the field and finished out the season on IR. The Bills bringing him up to the active roster. He did some good things on 3rd down, was like I mentioned, a backup player for the Bills, and he did some great things in 2024 with 3rd down catches and just blocking on the field. This is Ty Johnson coming over, like I mentioned, from the Jets, being acquired and makes the roster after Latavius Murray and Damian Harris leave the Bills in 2024, yes, free agency. So the Bills bring him in, and he was the primary backup. Does some good things behind James Cook, brings a different element to the team in terms of the interior running that he can do on the field, and has a pretty decent season. I won't bring up his numbers because it'll take me a little too long to find them, but I just want to highlight him. It'll be a tough decision, again, for Brandon Beane to decide whether he wants to re-sign or let Ty Johnson walk. Next player on the list was acquired from the Green Bay Packers, a cornerback who plays primarily zone coverage, but also has some tendencies to play some press man coverage. Rasul Douglas, who was acquired for a 3rd-round pick just a few years ago in the later part of the NFL season. He was acquired after the injuries to Tre'Davious White. Now the Bills acquired him to be the number one cornerback for the Buffalo Bills last season, and he did some really good things with the team and helped them get to the playoffs. This was at a time when the Bills really didn't have an answer in the cornerback room in terms of who was going to take over for Tre'Davious White. The Bills had Kyer Elam. They decided that they don't really believe in him. He was a first round pick the year that they decided that he just wasn't going to make it and that he needed more time to develop. So the Bills bring in Rasul Douglas. He comes in, has a pretty good year this season, does some really good things on the field in terms of stopping the run and also being involved in the pass coverage too. And this will be a fun decision for Brandon Beane to decide whether he wants to re-sign or let Rasul Douglas walk. Now, he's going to be a hot commodity. Again, another player like Amari Cooper that'll be a hot commodity in free agency. And could his market take him out of the running for being in Buffalo? That'll be determined too. Next player on the list is a fullback for the Buffalo Bills. This is a guy that I know my buddy Jake Podger of Nickel City Mafia absolutely loves. This is a guy in Reggie Gilliam that I know for sure Jake is going to be watching him, and he can tell you all the details. He was drafted out of Toledo. Actually, wasn't drafted. Yes, I am live, guys. I am live. This is a live show. I appreciate you guys tuning into the comments and everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is a live show, so don't forget that this is live. John Robert, who are you mentioning that is a great teammate in the locker room? I believe you're talking about Amari Cooper. Ty Johnson is awesome. Absolutely. John Robert also coming into the chat saying because of his play, Bills beat Detroit. Ty Johnson. Yep, absolutely. I am live, guys. So we are live. This is 2:43 Eastern Standard Time on January 28th. So I am live. I promise you guys. This is a different, unique show that we are doing just because I want to get into the free agency and talk about some of these players here on the list. So let's talk about Reggie Gilliam a little bit. He is a blocking guy. Doesn't really play a lot of snaps for the Buffalo Bills on offense, but when he is in the game, does some great things. I know Jake Podger absolutely loves him. We'll miss him if he doesn't re-sign with the Buffalo Bills, but he did sign a 2-year contract previously with the Buffalo Bills. And this is a player that I know is beloved in the locker room. So it'll be a difficult decision for the Bills to decide whether he wants to or whether they want to re-sign or let Reggie walk. Next player on the list is a long snapper for the Buffalo Bills. This guy is the longest tenured Bill. Has been with the team for a number of years, all of his career actually. And he is also one half of the long snappers in the AFC East division. His last name is represented as one half of the long snappers in the AFC East. This is Reed Ferguson. His brother Blake Ferguson plays for the Miami Dolphins as a long snapper too. So this is kind of a unique trait. Wears number 69 for his jersey number. Reed Ferguson, you don't really hear a lot about him, but you know for sure that the special teams unit of the Buffalo Bills this season has done a wonderful job, and they have been pretty quiet this year. So it'll be a difficult decision on whether the Bills want to re-sign or let him walk. I imagine they're going to let him re-sign probably later in free agency. His market, whether he's going to go somewhere else, don't really see it happening, but the Bills have to make a decision on whether they're going to re-sign or let him walk. And I imagine that Brandon Beane, who absolutely loves Reed, will re-sign him. Now, this next player on the list, wearing number 71, was a late addition to the Buffalo Bills after some injuries to the defensive line room. This was the player that was brought in along with another player that we'll talk about later in the show on a 1-year contract. He also played for the Buffalo Bills a few years back, if you remember, during the COVID years. He played for the Buffalo Bills. Quentin Jefferson coming over to the Buffalo Bills from the, I believe it was the Seattle Seahawks. He was acquired from the Seahawks. Comes over. Actually, it was the Cleveland Browns that he was with at the time, but he also played for the Seahawks at the time. Now, Quentin Jefferson didn't really have a big season for the Buffalo Bills this year. He was inactive a few games, along with the last game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Didn't really do anything, as I mentioned, for the Buffalo Bills. Finished out the year with for the Bills side of things, 8 tackles for 4 of those assisted, 1 sack overall for him in his career with the Buffalo Bills in 2024. Finished out with 6 tackles and 1 sack with the Cleveland Browns. So overall, 14 tackles, 2 sacks on the season. He's getting pretty old. He's 31 years old, drafted quite a while ago. He played for the New York Jets as well. Had a good season in 2023 with the Jets. Drafted in 2016 in the 5th round. It'll be determined on whether the Bills want to keep him around as a depth piece on the defensive line, but I imagine that the Bills will let him walk in free agency. But guys, my opinion on what will happen in free agency, I don't want to get too much involved in it. I shouldn't tell you my decisions on whether or not, but I am happy. I am kind of excited for the series to come along, but also don't forget that this series will be live each and every week, and we will talk about whether the Bills will re-sign or let this player walk. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut the rest of the show and not tell you whether or not we are going to re-sign or let them walk. The next player on the list hasn't really done anything in 2024, primarily a backup throughout his career. Tommy Doyle had an injury this season, unfortunately missed last season too. And there's not a lot of details on him, but he is a massive human being and wears number 72 on the team. Unfortunately, injuries are catching up with him, and the Bills will have to decide whether they want to keep him around as a swing tackle or decide if they want to go in another direction and get another swing tackle. Now, the Bills did re-sign Ryan Vandemark. They also have Alec Anderson, that is in the 6th offensive lineman for the Bills, and they have had a star-studded lineup in terms of their offensive line, primarily everybody playing each and every snap. There's been a couple of injuries where the Bills had to mix some players in during games, but primarily every game, the offensive line has been healthy. So the Bills have to decide whether they are going to re-sign or let Tommy Doyle walk. So that'll be a difficult decision again for Brandon Beane to decide. The next player on the list is going to be wearing jersey number 94, coming to the Buffalo Bills via free agency in 2024 out of the Jacksonville Jaguars camp. This is Dwayne Smoot, who was a backup for the Buffalo Bills in 2024 during the season. Finished out the year as a backup as well. Had some good games, had some bad games, but also has been primarily a run defender for the Buffalo Bills. He is kind of moved down the lineup in terms of what he did in 2024 for the team. You remember A.J. Epinesa along with Greg Rousseau and Von Miller being the primarily starters. Von Miller being in the mix a little bit as well as a backup player too, and a rotational player. But the Bills kind of liked what they saw from Javon Solomon, along with some of the other players that they have on the roster too. So it'll be to be determined on whether the Bills decide if they want to keep Dwayne Smoot or not. I know he is beloved in the locker room as well. So the Bills could decide that they want to re-sign him. But another difficult decision from Brandon Beane in camp. Now, the next player on the list, another defensive tackle, this is the guy that I was telling you that we will talk about later in the show, has pretty much stated this offseason that he is either going to re-sign with the Buffalo Bills or he is going to keep options open, won't retire necessarily, but will keep the option open until the Bills decide that they want to re-sign him. This is none other than Jordan Phillips, who came to the Buffalo Bills on his 3rd contract this time, acquired from the Dallas Cowboys practice squad, comes over to the Buffalo Bills and had some really good games in 2024. I remember the game where the last game actually that the Bills had, and he pretty much backed up a offensive lineman into into Patrick Mahomes. I'm sorry, guys. I'm reading some in the comments as well, trying to multitask. I'm not the best at it. I'm going to tell you that right now, but I want to get to some of the comments too. and talk about that. Josh Allen's wasted career. No, Edwards is not a free agent. He has one more year on his contract, so he is not a free agent. But let's talk about Jordan Phillips a little bit and talk about what he has done. Primarily a backup, he had a massive contract with the Arizona Cardinals just a few years ago, and signed that massive contract away from the Buffalo Bills. Him and along with Harrison Phillips both signed massive contracts, leaving the Buffalo Bills. Unfortunately, that was a difficult decision for the team. That year, we also lost Shaq Lawson. That was a tough decision too for the Bills to make. But he is 32 years old. Finished out his career on the Bills, as I mentioned this past year. Has gone from the Miami Dolphins, Buffalo Bills in 2018 was the first time that we had him. 2022, 2023, and then 2024, 2025 with the Buffalo Bills. Has a career stats of 186 tackles, 24 sacks in his career, 3 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, few passes deflections, actually 24 to be exact. Also has 2 touchdowns. He is 6'5", 329 pounds. So the numbers are there for him to be backup in the Chiefs game and in the playoffs. Has some good numbers overall: 3 tackles, 1 sack overall in during the season. But in terms of the regular season, no sacks, 6 tackles. So that'll be a difficult decision for the Bills to make. But whether or not they decide to re-sign or let him walk is determined by our GM and Brandon Beane. So we'll decide whether or not they're going to re-sign or let Jordan Phillips walk. But Josh Allen, wasted career, said Jordan Phillips earned a backup depth contract. I'll actually let our GM Brandon Beane decide. I don't want to get into it. We'll talk about that in an upcoming show. But let's talk about the next player on the list. This is the last player in terms of unrestricted free agents. Austin Johnson, who the Bills acquired from the Los Angeles Chargers. He is another defensive tackle. Bills kind of going with a smaller defensive tackle room now with the losses to the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. The Bills deciding that they need to revamp that defensive line room. The Bills acquired a few guys in terms of Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson. So I imagine that the tendency that the Bills are having in 2025 is that they want to get a little bit bigger in terms of what they need to go after. Now, there's some great players in the draft in 2025 that the Bills could go after. A couple of names that come to mind is I'll probably say it wrong, but there's a player out of Ohio State and Williams. I won't say his first name because I'll say it wrong. But there's also Alfred Collins, who is a second-round pick. The Bills do have 2 second-round picks in 2025 after acquiring a second-round pick in the Stephon Diggs trade. The Bills could decide that they want to extend a pick to a defensive lineman early on in the draft. And I imagine that that's the direction that the Bills will go in, especially when the run defense has been an issue for the Buffalo Bills for a number of years. The Bills also have some upcoming contracts that they're going to need to make in 2026. In Daquan Jones, that's another player that's getting older. So the Bills could decide that they want to revamp the defensive line room for the team. So Austin Johnson, let's talk about him a little bit and talk about some of the numbers that he had in 2024. So he was primarily a backup in 2024, had a few starts on the season, finished out the year with a half a sack, 19 tackles, also had 2 interceptions. If you remember the game against the Colts, had an interception where he ran it back for 4 yards. Also had an interception against the Seattle Seahawks where he ran it back for 5 yards. So 9 total yards in terms of runs, but 2 games in the span of 3 games where he had an interception early on in the season. Came to the Buffalo Bills on a 1-year contract worth $3.5 million. He is 30 years old, second-round pick in 2016 out of Penn State, and he is 6'4", 313 pounds. Has played for the Los Angeles Chargers and the Tennessee Titans in his career. So it will be determined on whether the Buffalo Bills decide whether they want to re-sign or let him walk. I'll get to some of the comments here on Facebook. This is John Robert coming in. saying that the Bills need to draft a one tech. Definitely, definitely agree with that. So I will get into some of the picks that the Bills do have in 2025, the draft picks. Let me pull that up real quick, but I want to get into that. I know the Bills do have the 30th overall pick in the draft in 2025. They do have the 2 second-round picks in 2025 too. I'm going to pull up the Bills draft. So they do have a first-round pick, 2 second-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks, and 3 sixth-round picks in the draft. This is what they have overall. So the Bills have a first-round pick. That's their own. They also have the second-round pick of their own. Second-round pick from the Houston Texans in the Stephon Diggs trade. They lost their third-round pick after trading it to the Cleveland Browns in the trade that brought Amari Cooper to the Buffalo Bills. They have a fourth-round pick. They also have another fourth-round pick that they acquired from the Chicago Bears. They lost their fifth-round pick. That was in another trade that they made as well. And then they have 3 sixth-round picks. A couple of those were from trades that they had last season. They also had a trade in the Amari Cooper trade. They traded a 7th-round pick for a 6th-round pick, and that's how we determined the draft order there. So I did mention Damar Hamlin. Yes, he is a free agent. Yes, shout out to John Robert. He is right. Appreciate the show, guys. Yes, appreciate you guys as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk about some of the restricted free agents. I won't get into them too much, but some of the restricted free agents that the Bills do have, the 6 offensive linemen on the Buffalo Bills, Alec Anderson, Shane Bichelle, who injured his arm in practice, is another free agent. And then Quentin Morris, the third string tight end for the Buffalo Bills, is another player that the Bills will have to decide whether they want to re-sign or let him walk too. So appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. I will get into the comments a little bit more. I apologize. I was on another screen and I wasn't able to get into the comments too much, but I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find all of the shows that we're going to be doing on our channel on Facebook, along with on YouTube. We will have our next show that we'll be doing where we will kick off the Resign or Let Walk series. This will be tonight, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and on Facebook. So click on over, keep the notifications open. You can find that series beginning at, like I mentioned, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll have some film. We'll also have some details and stats on the player. But we're going to start off the series with none other than Damar Hamlin. We'll start off the series with the lowest jersey number, working our way all the way up to the highest jersey number. So we'll begin with Damar Hamlin, and then we'll work our way all the way until we get to Austin Johnson as well. So then once free agency ends, we will talk about the draft picks and get into the draft, have some fun shows that we will have with some of my friends on the channels. And Sean Kula, Mike Fortin will be brought on as well, and Jake Podger. And we'll talk about and do some mock drafts throughout the offseason. So that'll be fun to see here too. John Robert coming in saying Brandon Beane will find a way to get more draft picks. Absolutely. Send Damar Hamlin to Miami. Didn't really work out for them in 2024 with Jordan Poyer. So I imagine that if they bring him over, it'll probably work out in 2025. So don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and keep the notification bell open and share. You guys can always share with all your friends. We appreciate all the messages here. Jake I believe he did interview a Bills player. So I'll get the details on that and send it over to you, Trek Reviewer. But don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, go Bills.